Welcome back to the Monarch lathe. Today we're going to talk about threading. I'm still getting a lot of people with questions about threading, pertaining to compound position and when to engage the dial. I do enjoy showing the threading on my channel, and I show it every once in a while. We've got some videos out there, and here recently I think I've been doing quite a bit of threading. So we're going to go over this again, and hopefully I can try to explain a few things and make a little bit more sense to you. I know that for you guys that really, you do this stuff like me, this is elementary to you, but there's a lot of guys that are new, that are learning. They're trying to learn this and they've never done this stuff. So I'm really trying to help you guys out that really don't have an understanding for threading. So like I said, there's a few things I want to go over, and we're mainly going to focus on the compound in feed being at 30 degrees. I'm going to show you why I use this, because you can use this technique and you can use a straight in feed method, which I think a lot of people must do that, because I get a lot of questions that say, why are you feeding that in on 30 degrees instead of straight in feed on the cross slide? And then we're also gonna deal with the threading dial down here on the machine. I don't think you can see it from that point of view, but I'll bring the camera in and I'm going to explain this and when to engage the half nuts depending on the thread pitch that you're trying to cut. So I've got this tool blank right here. This is not one that I ground. This is one I had in the box. We're just using this as an example, and I've got this threading gauge here, also known as a fishtail, but this is a threading gauge. It's just an old Starrett one here. But anyway, so compound set on 30 degrees, right? Actually, I have it set on 29.5 degrees on this one here. 29.5 to 30. The 29.5 is so that whenever you're feeding in, you're not rubbing the side of the tool each time. You're not rubbing this side of the cut. So to try to explain that 30 degree in feed, each pass, we're going to feed that in each pass. This is kind of what it looks like. If you imagine this being your workpiece that you're cutting, that's the thread, this is your tool. So you start out here, and each pass you're feeding in further, and that 30 degree angle on the compound is following that shape of your tool. So it's feeding in like that. So you're not cutting on the right side of the tool, you're cutting on the left side. Every time you make a pass, you're making a cut on the left side right here. So it's going to be, let me put the little bit of green on this side right here. You're just cutting on the left side of the tool if you're doing external threads here. If you're doing an internal thread, it's going to be just the opposite. So that's what it looks like. It's feeding in at a 30 degree angle so that you cut on one side of the tool. And I think you create a lot better looking thread by doing it that way than doing a straight in feed. That's the way I cut almost all my threads, unless I'm chasing a thread, or if you're doing a real fine pitch where you're really not feeding in very far at all, you can do straight in feed. It's not going to hurt anything. You just have to be careful about how big of a cut you're actually taking if you're doing a straight in feed, because then you're ripping material from each side of the tool, and it'll make a really bad looking cut down there on your threads. So if you're doing a straight in feed, if you're taking, you can take some heavy cuts to kind of initially remove the metal, but once you start getting closer to the size, you need to back off and take light cuts and spring cuts so that this tool will really kind of shape that thread and clean it up. All right, so I hope that kind of makes some sense there. We're going to cut, I'm going to give you some examples of even thread pitch, odd thread pitch, and fractional thread pitch, but we're going to have two variations of a fractional thread pitch and when to engage on the threading dial down here, okay? I'm not cutting any particular thread, we're just threading the OD of this part. This old piece of 5-inch chrome, you've probably already seen it a few times, but we're just that's just some sacrificial metal that I cut off of a hydraulic rod, and we just keep using it up until it's going to be gone. All right, so let's get down here and look at the threading dial. We'll talk a little bit more about when to engage. All right, so we're down here at the threading dial on my Monarch lathe. Now, this should be equipped on most all lathes. I'm aware that some lathes don't have it, and some of these actually just kind of bolt onto the side of the saddle right here, or on the front side. And this just runs off of a worm that's being driven off the lead screw back here. So this is timed with your lead screw. Your lead screw is timed with your spindle by the gear train on the back of the lathe. So as long as you don't open up the back of the lathe and change your gears, this will always be timed with your lead screw and your spindle when this thing is running. So remember that. I have a lot of questions about that. Like, how do you know, how does the machine know when to go in to engage the lead every time? That's just how the machine is built. That's how it's set up with the quadrant gears on the back of the lathe. That's a subject for a whole nother video right there. So just remember that. This is all synced and all timed with each other, and that's all you need to remember for now. So I got the thing where we can go ahead and engage it. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on, and you can see it turning there. All right, let me wipe that thing off a little bit. So you can clearly see the 1, 2, and 3, and the 4, right? That is 4 quadrants. This actually has 8 quadrants. You see the lines in between? They're a little hard to see on this one, but you have a line in between. So in reality, you have 8 marked quadrants. You have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you have the 4 that's in between there. So there's your 8. But you actually have 16 quadrants. And I know that might be getting a little confusing, but you have a quadrant in between this line and the number. Okay? And I'll show you by throwing it in. All right, so there's a number, there's an in between, there's in between that. And you can do that by just pulling the half nuts and feeling it fall in. So here's what you need to know. My lead screw is 4 threads per inch. Some lathes may have an 8 thread per inch. But on a 4, any thread pitch that's divisible by 4, in this case we're going to cut a 12. 12 is divisible by 4. So any pitch divisible by 4, your lead screw here, you can engage these half nuts anywhere you want and it'll line up. You don't even have to look at this thing. You can just engage it. You know, if you're up here threading, you don't even look down here. You just engage it. Okay, you just engage it. As long as the half nuts mesh. Now you got to make sure they mesh. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32. Any thread pitch that's divisible by 4, you can engage this anytime and it'll line up with the thread that you're cutting. So all of your other even thread pitches, you can engage on any of the 8 quadrants and it'll line up. Okay? Anything that's not divisible by 4 that's an even, engage on any 8 quadrant. Not the 16, but the 8. Okay, for your odd pitches. For your odd pitches, what you want to do, say you're cutting an 11 or a 13 or a 9, go ahead and just use your marked numbers so that it's easy to remember. So your 4 quadrants that's marked, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you start on that, all right, that's your first cut. Your second cut, bam, you can go to that one. Any 4 quadrant, but as long as you're on the same 4 quadrants. That'll be for an odd pitch. So fractionals, here's where we start getting a little anxiety, right? Fractionals. So if you're cutting a half, say you're cutting an 11.5 pitch, that is a pipe thread, by the way. If you're cutting a half, what you want to do is you want to pick this, and what I would do, since that's a super odd thread anyway, I would pick 1 or 3, but you're in line with the 3, so it needs to be the opposite side. So you can engage it. We'll go ahead and our first cut will be a 1. All right, made our first cut. We're coming back. you can hit the 3 and it'll engage, okay? As long as it's the opposite side, but it's only going to be 2 numbers, so stick with that number and you can go to the opposite side and it will engage. If you engage on this side, you're going to split your thread, a 2 or 4. All right, and one last thing. If you're cutting a, I think I got out of frame there. If you're cutting an odd thread such as a 5 3/4 pitch, you're going to want to engage the same number every time. If you don't, it will not line up. So I usually just see, I have like a yellow dot marked on that 3. So you would just pick one and mark it so that it's easy to see and engage it every time. That's for an odd pitch, such as a 3/4 or a 3/8 or something like that. Not a half of a pitch, but something in between that. Hit the same number every time. So our first pitch that we're going to cut is a 12 pitch. This is the one that's divisible by 4, and we can hit any number on the threading dial there. So I got my cross slide set to 0. We're going to go ahead and touch off with the compound. And I'm just going to go ahead and feed it in 15 thousandths. All right, so I'm just going to pick a spot and go. I think I hit 2 there, so we'll hit a 3. Let's go in between there. Now we're going to hit between 2 and 3. See, it's lining up. Let's go right there. Look at that. See, it's cutting it. So now I'm not even going to look down here. I'm just going to be looking at the tool right here, and I'm going to feel those half nuts engage with the lever here. All right, so there it is. Divisible by 4, you can engage this anywhere, you don't even have to look at it. Okay, so next up we're going to cut a 10 pitch, which is an even thread. So that's the thread that you can hit any of your 8 quadrants. So we're gonna cut it, and I'll show you where you can hit all 8, and then I'll split it to show you why you can't hit in between on the other quadrants there. So we'll start with a number. All right, there's an in between line, and you see that it's engaging. So hit any number. You can hit any number or the line between the numbers there. So now we're gonna split it though, and I'll show you. All right, you see that? So an even pitch, any of your 8 lines. All right, so our next pitch that we're gonna cut is an odd pitch. I've got it set to 11. So that would be like a 5/8 11 bolt if you're trying to cut something like that. All right, so we mentioned that when we're cutting odd, you want to stay on 4 lines, the same 4 lines. So I would pick, if you're going to cut it, you would pick the numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4. Don't worry about in between there. But just pick the same 4 numbers, and we'll start on 1. I kind of missed that one. We'll go ahead and hit 3. All right, so that was a 3. All right, let's go to 4. Let's see if it lines up. See that? It lines up. All right, we hit 3, 4. Let's go to 1. It lines up. Last one we didn't hit was a 2, so let's go ahead and wait for it to come around to 2. Okay, so let's go in between, see what it does. Oh, look at that, splits it. So an odd thread, any of the 4 numbers, just stay on the numbers, don't go in between them. All right, so this thread is going to be our fractional. It's going to be our half pitch. We're going we're going to cut 11 and a half, which would be a pipe thread if you're machining like a pipe flange or a piece of pipe or something like that. So to go over again what we're going to do, on a fractional thread, you want to stay on 2 lines. We're going to use 1 and 3. Whatever number you pick, you need to engage it on that one or the one 180 degrees off of it. So in line, we'll use 1 and 3. Alright, so there's our 3 mark. Alright, we'll wait for it to come around. We're going to hit a 1 and see if it lines up. See that? 1. I missed it. Yeah, then you got to wait for it to come back around again. Okay, 1 and 3. So now we're gonna prove that you can't use the other numbers. So we'll hit a 4 this time. All right, see, it split it. So, what did we learn? On a fractional, on a half pitch anyway, pick 2 numbers and stick with them. All right, this is the last pitch that we're going to be cutting, and I've got it set to a super odd 5 3/4. So to recap, on a fractional pitch that is not half, you need to pick 1 number on this and stick with it every pass, or you'll split a thread. So we're going to use 3 because I already got the yellow dot on it, and we'll make a couple passes to see it cut here, to get our cut established. All right, engaging on the 3. We're lining up. So now so let's go to a 1, see what happens. That'll be on the opposite side of the dial here. See, it split it. It absolutely split it. And same thing would happen if you go to a 2, you're going to be to the side of that. You're going to split it again, see? Makes a neat looking pattern if you ever need to make a pattern like that. So, fractional thread that's not a half pitch, pick a number, mark it, and stick with it every pass. That's the only pitch, that's the only thread that you got to really worry about hitting the same one every time. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that demonstration, and I hope that it made some sense. I really tried to make it as simple as possible to follow, and as always, I try to explain things in a way that my mind works. You know, I'm trying to spill out how I'm thinking in my mind on how this machining operations are happening and what to do. So I would encourage you to find a piece of metal like this, you know, just any kind of scrap metal. Go out there to your lathe, chuck it up, and practice, and do exactly what I did right here. That way you can prove it to yourself, not just watching somebody else do it, but whenever you prove it to yourself and you get out here and you start throwing in these half nuts and watching what that tool is doing, it starts making more sense to you. And realistically, that's how I learned this stuff. You know, I was taught and I was told this is what you do, but the more I did it and the more I practiced, trial and error, it started making sense with me. Even though I'm not the best one to sit here and explain to you all of the mathematics and the theories behind how this stuff works, just knowing what to do to cut the proper thread pitch without screwing up, you know, that's what I know. So get out there and practice, cut different pitches, and remember what I said, you know, make you some notes if you have to on where to engage this half nuts and prove it to yourself. And the more you do it, the more you'll retain that and you'll start remembering that. And whenever you're having to do this stuff, I know as a hobbyist, you know, if you're going to cut a thread every once in a while, you're not really worried about how long you're spending on doing it. But if you're doing this as a job, you know, like I do every day, you can't stand here and wait for the same number to go around on that dial every time. You know, it just takes too long. You want to know when to engage it so that you can get your job done more efficiently and know that you're doing it correctly at the same time. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving holiday, and I always appreciate you tuning in and dropping me a comment, and hopefully you reach up there and you hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time, all right?